In our first session for today, Erratica and Beyond, we are pleased to present someone who with her wit and insight has been chronicling India's heartbeat for decades. To guide this special conversation, I now call upon our distinguished writer, Ms. Namita Devidayal, to introduce the one and only, the legend, Ms. Bachi Karkaria. I now invite Rotarian Yamini Kundekar to formally introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Kalita. Good morning yet again. With immense pleasure and delight, let me introduce to you all the moderator of this session, Namita Devidayal. Namita is an eminent journalist and a classically trained vocalist whose life beautifully bridges the world of rigorous reporting with the deep soul of Indian arts. She serves as a senior journalist for the Times of India, wielding a pen as insightful as it is elegant. A proud graduate of Princeton University, her intellectual curiosity and lyrical sensitivity infuse her acclaimed body of work. She is the celebrated author of the award-winning memoir, The Music Room, a winner of the 2008 Vodafone Crossword Popular Book Award. Her literary repertoire also includes the engaging novel Aftertaste and the compelling biography The Sixth String of Vilayat Khan. Her most recent and highly discussed work, Tangerine, How to Read the Upanishads Without Giving Up Coffee, chronicles her midlife journey into Hindu philosophy with accessibility, humor, and a non-dogmatic spirit. The book blends memoir, music, and philosophy, reflecting her own deep engagement with culture. Having also served as the co-director of the Times Lit Fest, Namita Devidayal is a true cultural synthesist, a writer whose work is as richly steeped in the classical traditions of India as it is attuned to the pulse of modern life. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for Namita Devidayal. And now it's time for me to introduce our legendary speaker of the session. With great respect and honor, we present to you a trailblazer of Indian journalism, Bachi Karkaria. Bachi Karkaria stands as a towering figure in the landscape of Indian journalism. A true doyen whose visionary spirit fundamentally reshaped the nation's metropolitan news culture. She is celebrated as the editor who dared to move the pulse of the city, its vibrant and complex urban issues from the back pages to the coveted front page, forever transforming what we call metro journalism. Her editorial prowess is legendary. As a Jefferson Fellow and the Indian board member of the World's Editors Forum, she masterminded some of Times of India's most iconic and enduring offerings by creating and editing the effervescent Bombay Times. Her strategic brilliance shines in the swift and stunning turnaround of TUI Bangalore, where her leadership propelled the edition from number 4 to the pinnacle of number 1 in a mere 18 months. Beyond the newsroom, she has been a tireless advocate and curator of culture, co-curating the esteemed Times Lit Fest Mumbai for 8 celebrated years. Her monumental career has been rightfully adorned with innumerable accolades, including the Mary Morgan Hewitt Lifetime Achievement Award and the prestigious 2024 Ladli Award for Gender Sensitivity. Karkaria's fearless pen wielded genuine social change. Her groundbreaking, unflinching reporting on AIDS was so powerful, it didn't just inform, it catalyzed a shift in both national policy and public consciousness, earning her advisory roles with influential bodies like NACO and the Gates Foundation. Today, she continues to captivate millions through her beloved columns, weaving satire and wit in Erratica and dispensing candid, heartfelt wisdom in giving gyan. a best-selling author of compelling works like In Hot Blood, Dare to Dream, and Capture the Dream. She also dedicates herself to nurturing the next generation, shaping the craft through media training across continents. Bachi remains an enduring muse, her indelible legacy inscribed in the stories she tells, the journalists she mentors, and the pages she has filled. She continues to inspire through her writing, teaching, and editorial membership. Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the one and only Bachi Karkaria in talks with the very dynamic Namita Devidayal.
I have a much shorter introduction to Bachi, which is that it's a secret that I'm going to let out because I've come to Thane. She's actually a teenager wearing an old person's disguise. You know, when we were driving here, I was with her son and daughter-in-law, and we just celebrated Bachi's 80th birthday a couple of months ago. And when Akshita, her daughter-in-law, was sending out the invites to people, she said that 50% of the people who wrote back, before they even said their RSVP to accept, etc., they wrote back saying, 80? Really? And that's really Bachi for me, and for a lot of people who know her, quite beyond her career. But I think we will talk about her public interface and start at the very beginning. So Bachi, why don't you tell us about, Bachi's a third generation journalist. So why don't you tell us about your very early days in Calcutta, where your father ran a press and a newspaper, the Navroz, and just like any stories about that time, and then we'll get to the 3 mantras that your father taught you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that introduction. It's always very, very embarrassing to listen to that and say, good Lord, did I do all that? And actually I haven't. So any person who does an introduction, please take it with a huge pinch of salt. All right, now to come back to my family. My grandfather in 1917 started a Gujarati weekly in Calcutta. So Calcutta, Gujarati, it wasn't a Parsi weekly, but it was like for all the Gujarati-speaking communities of Calcutta. And they were all outpost diaspora communities, so they really needed this bond. And but of course, this is Calcutta. There was hardly any Gujarati press. There was no Gujarati press. There was very little Gujarati writing. And so my grandfather had to, first of all, get all the typefaces from Gujarat Foundry in Mumbai, and they came in a crate. But now remember, this is 1917, so they came in this crate which came half broken. So my grandfather followed the Thela Gari, from Howrah station to our press, picking up the pieces which were falling out of the crate. And then having done that, naturally all the typefaces were jumbled. So then he had to sit and, get those sorted. Now, there were no Gujarati people who were ready to, because whoever were there were already working with their mama, kaka, etc. So he took these fresh off the boat Bihari boys, trained them in the language, maybe not the spoken language, but about the setting. So remember, these are hard metal hand set types. So you had each font and you put each one of them, into that form. So this was the whole legend of it starting. And the family has a lot of legends, and among them is the fact that they never missed a day of publication. So even during the war, during the riots, so which is why when I'm told, why do you have to sort of write a column every week? If you're on a holiday, go. I said, oh my God, no, I can't. I have to remember that if this paper survived through fire, flood, and riot and world war, then I have to do it. So that's my grandfather. My father, of course, grew up also in Calcutta, and so his Gujarati was again smattering, but he went to supply side. He went and got a wife from Gujarat, from Navsari. And so my mother, who was really just a matriculate from Navsari, daughter of a priest, very modest background, but was always in the library. So she had this very literary, and she'd studied Persian as well. So she actually, turned out to be the de facto editor of the paper and took it to a very different level. And really, when she died, like there were 114 institutions in Calcutta which were part of the memorial service. So I sort of, when I was growing up, I was like, all of us don't have a very often a relationship with our mothers. But it's in later years that I've realized the kind of leap that she had made.
Wow, thank you for sharing that, Bachi. One of the most amazing things about Bachi's career is that it's sort of a Bharat Darshan. So, you've really done all the metro cities, and after Calcutta, you came to Bombay and joined the Times of India School of Journalism, the training times. And really that's incredible because, Bachi is like a compulsive grammar monitor. So if you say something, like many of us now talk in this way where we'll have a little bit of American in the way we talk, and if you give something and I say, no, I'm good, she'll be like, what do you mean you're good? I know you're bad. And so tell us about the Times of India, how you came to Bombay, what brought you there, how did that transition happen, and was that the real beginning of your career as such?
Well, yes and no, because as since we grew up on the premises of that press, so you'll have old-fashioned people saying, oh, she has ink running in her blood. And it was almost that, because you were breathing the fumes of those lead types. And so I kind of was always co-opted to write the report for my father's paper. They had one English section for the Parsis. So if it was a 16-page paper, it had two pages for Parsis, because the Parsis of Calcutta did not know Gujarati. And they certainly couldn't read it, and they certainly couldn't understand my mother's level of Gujarati. So I used to do kind of that sort of reporting, but of course it was very different. But of course then my father, let me tell you a little, go back on this.
Please share your father's mantras, because I promise you'll end up following at least one of them.
So I have grown up being brainwashed into these words. You're not a dumb donkey who's going to get married, and you have a career to follow. So so it became very difficult to handle personal relationships thanks to this terrible, first of all, this weight of destiny. You are not to get married. I mean, any man who... So when I came to Bombay, there it was all, everyone was in marriage mode. So, you used to have these young Parsi boys who my aunt was throwing in my path. And there's my father, and here's this aunt, and what am I to do? So I had a wonderful ploy, which was that every time these young men would come, and not that many, okay, sorry.
Because there are not that many Parsis only.
Bombay mein bahut the. And so then I would say, in my Marxist days, when I was a revolutionary, and I was, like everyone in Calcutta University was a revolutionary. So that was a perfect put-off for the Parsi boys. They would really run a mile. So then I was like saved from all that.
But you would have made a very good Bombay housewife.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And anyway, so I came here, and for me it was like a really culture shock. One, because first of all I was staying with my aunt to start with, and it was a Parsi colony, and I had never known Parsis in that form, right? So I'd never known so many Parsis. Like in Calcutta, you might come across one in like a month's time or during an event. But here if you spoke in Gujarati, there was somebody who would interfere and, jump into the conversation. So it was quite unnerving. But it was really nice because Bombay was a very different city from Calcutta. So for me, it was a whole new experience. And with the training times, you had to spend 6 weeks with each paper. So I first went to Femina, and then I went to Illustrated Weekly. But with Illustrated Weekly, we'll come to that, my favorite part of my career. And then Kushwant Singh said, no, she doesn't need to go anywhere else. So then I continued there, for 10 years.
Oh my God! So what happened to the other parts of the?
Nothing. I didn't do. And sometimes I feel bad. No, you see, it was that first we did a lot of text.
By the way, this was in 1969. Just to give some context, timeline. It's extraordinary. It's like I was just about born.
So no, we did the training theory part. See, it already.
Can you describe a little bit about what the Times was then? Because journalism is no longer journalism. So in those days, just a little bit, like some kind of visual description. Because it was the typeset days as well, right? Like,
yeah, it was. See, I didn't have.
And there were mostly men.
Pardon?
There were mostly men in the
No, there were a lot of women.
Oh,
There were a lot of women because, especially, like we were on the magazine floor, and I was very pleased to meet your moderator. I mean, the lady who introduced me in such glowing terms, because her mother-in-law used to be at Dharmyog, and we were at Illustrated Weekly, and this was the fourth floor, and so all the magazines were there, and the magazines were very heavily women. With a lot of women, but even in Times of India, there were quite a few on the reporting and.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
So, what was the training essentially that you went through? Like, what
Training was like, I mean, one really didn't need it, but it was like, we did exercises, we brought out a training times, and I'll tell you something about that. So, because we all used to kind of produce this paper, and one day I had nothing to write, so I just sat down and wrote down all my impressions about Bombay Parsis. And that piece, it was the editor called it year plug, here cometh the Parsi. And it began with, there are two kinds of Parsis in Bombay, those who work in Central Bank and those who don't. And it is scary. It is really scary. Not so much now, because I think that generation has died off or got dementia or whatever. But so I would constantly be meeting Parsis who'd come up and say, I'm a Parsi, but I don't work in Central Bank. And even the non-Parsis, they would have not read anything that I'd written so much after that, but they'd all remember that.
That's fantastic. I still remember a middle that Bachi had written, which was called Dadar Side of Midnight. Bachi, I think you really did reinvent language and storytelling at some other levels. So, was Khushwant Singh, can you tell us about your Khushwant Singh days and how much of that has influenced your whole style of storytelling, where humor is such a big part of it, but there's also an incredible gravitas?
If you ask me to speak on Khushwant Singh, I will not stop.
No, I'll stop.
Even my days in the weekly, because they were so formative, and I can promise you and say with the greatest degree of honesty that what I learned at the weekly with Khushwant Singh was something that has been the entire, it not just influence, but it has actually formed me as a journalist.
Bachi, can you tell the audience a little bit before that about the Illustrated Weekly? Because I don't think many people of our generation are even familiar with it.
People know about the Illustrated Weekly. Wow. Not bad.
I mean, it was really quite the magazine of India.
So when Khushwant Singh took over, the former editor, it used to have quite a legacy of writers, but then the last bit was like really bad, and it was A.S. Raman, who used to only have pictures of himself with his current godman on the cover. Yeah. And in fact, when I went to Statesman many years later, and the Statesman, of course, lives in a world of its own, and had not known at all what Khushwant Singh had done to the weekly. That means that Khushwant Singh took it up to, since everything is measured in circulation, he took it up to 3 lakhs at a time when the Times of India was 1 lakh. Yeah. And
it was a national magazine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what would you say was the defining feature of this magazine? Why was it so successful? Was it modelled on Life magazine to some extent?
Not at all. The one thing he took from Reader's Digest would start everything with an anecdote. But otherwise it was not the Reader's Digest. It was, Rahul Singh, his son, described it best, that he took magazine journalism and shook it by the scruff of its neck. And today we talk about reader friendly, appealing to the thing, he started all that. He said, okay, I don't want Hari Prasad Chaurasia. Okay, I want him, but I want Shakila Bano Bhopali. And at that time there was this stone murderer, Raman Raghav, and there was the trial. And Kushwant Singh sat through that trial and wrote all about it. So it was really coming down to the level of it. You see, at one level it still is. But journalism was all about writing for your peers, writing for for your sources, and like it was always the story about editors of Times of India were measured in how many times they said, as I said to the PM, or as the PM said to me. So that was a very, very different culture. And in the Times of India, Samir Jain, who is blamed for a lot, he's the one who really changed that.
It's true.
So Kushwant Singh...
Everyone has a nice side.
Yeah. So Kushwant Singh, kind of really changed it. He understood people. And it's really strange because he was a novelist, okay? He was the authoritative, historian of Sikhism, right? And he didn't want to join the Illustrated Weekly. But he kept on making very outrageous demands. But they all said, yeah, we'll take you. And they did it. And he understood it. And so, for instance, today we talk so much in the paper about community. Like we are always doing community in a big way. So Kushwant Singh started by having, he covered all the communities of India in a cover story. And he would sort of talk about their eminent people, which was of course very flattering for them, and about their rituals and their history. So he gave the entire, that unity and diversity sense. The the most important thing was that he was totally irreverent. And I think that is what I have learned, from him. If today one is even allowed to be irreverent, but I will not go into that hot potato.
Alex Smart.
Yeah. And, but he was always deflating. The bigger the gas bag, the happier he was to deflate it. And he didn't stop when they died. He was famous for writing the most awful obituaries about people.
Tell us the most interesting fun one.
I cannot remember those obituaries, but in our journalism book, and this whole business of obituaries becoming into, real
hagiographies.
Yeah, hagiographies. So in our journalism book, there was a line that said that the tradition in obituaries is the Latin phrase nil nisi bonum, nothing but good. But they've got so bad that it's become into nil nisi bunkum. So
Meaning?
It's bunk.
Oh.
Yeah, it's only bunk, nothing but the Latin is nothing but good. But now it became nothing but bunk. Anyway, so Kushwant Singh would do that. And he was so bold, even in public, like in speaking, when he'd be at a conference, everyone would be droning, etc. But the minute Kushwant Singh went to the podium, there'd be this audible, kind of excitement through the wave.
Because he used to tell the best dirty jokes also. He used to tell great dirty jokes. He
was very great he used to love saying his dirty. He created this image of dirty jokes. He created this image of dirty old man. But he was really nothing like that. I mean, I'm sorry, he'll never forgive me for ruining his reputation. But,
Bachi, let's get back to Kushwant Singh later. But now we're going to move back to Calcutta, where you joined the Statesman. And the line that you famously, I remember, said about that is that what you learned over there is that a dead dog on the road is more important than floods in China.
That I did not relearn in Statesman. It just got endorsed in the Statesman.
I see.
But it's again a line from my journalism book that the dead dog in the street outside is more important than the flood in China. It really does sum up the fact of, like I talked about community. Okay, but it's also
local.
Yeah, not in my backyard. So.
And the idea of local news being so important, and I guess this was pre-television or... Oh yeah, I'm like losing the chronology. So can you tell us a little bit about reporting on the city, which is what you started doing essentially there, right? Like the whole sort of ground level reporting, that famous story that won you an award, was it the Metro story or So can you talk a little bit about that one story and also what the takeaway is from that kind of reporting and why that's so important even today?
So actually, after 10 years with the Illustrated Weekly, my late husband, ex-husband, kind of he took a job in Calcutta, much on my prompting, because by then Kushwant Singh had left and the weekly was not at all as much fun as it used to be. And so we came back to the Statesman, and for about 6 months I tried, not working and sending stories to the Illustrated Weekly. It didn't quite work. And so then like Mr. C.R. Irani, who was the managing director, he kept saying, why don't you join? So I joined. But as I was telling you earlier, like Statesman lived in that world of its own and there's, nothing else. And I remember one assistant editor knew about my work and the other assistant editor had only thought of the Illustrated Weekly in those old days and said, Ranabir, I didn't know you went to the dentist that often, because the old dog-eared copies of Illustrated Weekly used to be in the dentist department, along with copies of Soviet Land. Those were all free things which used to be. So now this new editor, the old editor was dying, and he was dead actually by the time I had joined. And let me tell them that about my joining the Times of Statesman.
Oh, of course.
Okay. So
talk about anything, Bachi.
The first day that I joined Statesman, as I walked into the office, Sanjay Gandhi fell from the sky and crashed and died. The second day, V.V. Giri died. The third day, that lovely editor died. So I said, now the fourth day, if somebody dies, I am not going to join this paper. And I was like the first woman assistant editor, and there the news editor said, over my dead body. But he didn't die right away. He died 10 years later, thank God. And because why was I a journalist? So first of all, I was a woman. Secondly, I had gone to journalism school, which was like for old-fashioned journalists. That was anathema. You had to learn journalism on the job. You didn't learn it in the class.
I would agree though.
Yeah. So anyway, I come here and this editor, who's this Marxist and has sort of lived in another frame and really didn't know what I was about. So he said, okay, you write edits on municipal affairs, which at that time was the lowest beat. And so now I didn't have to write I was an assistant editor, right? I didn't have to file a report every day. So I then used, all my weekly background to write feature stories. Now, Calcutta still is, and at that time was like the dying, Rajiv Gandhi had famously called it the dying city, and it was like, because of Mother Teresa, it was like the metaphor of squalor and of poverty, and it had lots and lots of civic problems. So it was a gold mine. There was the gold mine in the gutters over there. And so I began to write these city stories in great depth. And they had such a response, because people had given up on Calcutta. Nobody said, there's no point in even anybody writing about it because it's a dead city. So now here I was writing about it, trying to find out, what exactly was wrong, why it was going wrong, So they were like, and when I saw the response, I said, this is really what is so important.
Is there any one story that you'd like to talk about, either from Cal or Bangalore, that you've reported on, or Bombay? Well, the AIDS one for sure we'd like to talk about, but where you feel like, that's what makes you really excited to be a journalist, where you can actually see the impact.
I'll tell you about Calcutta. Let me tell you about this local journalism, because I think I'm really a champion for local stories. And when I went to Bangalore, we kind of finally convinced the Times, and we'll come to that. But like in the Statesman also, like I did this 4-part series on hospitals, and I kind of didn't do one hospital at a time because that would have become so repetitive. So I had this, these are the pre-computer days, remember that. And so I had this thing that I would fill my notebooks, with all these interviews and whatever material I had got. And then I would go and I would number the pages of these notebooks. And like sometimes there were like 3 or 4 notebooks. I'd number the pages, then as I read through it, I would find the broad streams of the main thing, and then put those page numbers under that heading. So there was no word, search engine, nothing in those days. So that is how then I kind of did it. And I remember that Jyoti Basu, like who was the CPM, God, if you can say God in Marxism. And he kind of actually told the hospital workers that, look, hospitals are not like your regular, feature. You cannot do your trade union buzzy in hospitals. And this was after.
Wow.
Right? Then there was this story because, you see, everything was CPM. So the municipal corporation was CPM and the government was...
Communist Party of Marxist.
Communist Party, yeah. And so there was one very derelict public square, which was by now right in the heart of city, if every one of you know, it was on Park Street, which was like the trendiest city, but it had fallen to druggies and stuff like that. And so what the municipal corporation, with the connivance of the state government, were trying to convert it into a commercial complex. And because I've been writing on city stories, a city activist sort of gave me wind about the story. And then it became like one of the biggest, controversies of Calcutta. And I actually really single-handed, because then the other reporters, in fact, one of my assistant editors told the other reporters that, why is she having to carry this whole burden on her own? And they said, no, it's her story, we don't want to touch it.
Bachi, just can we move on to, because I think we're going to be short of time, and I want to again talk about your most kind of compelling stories in the health sector, which was on AIDS. Again, we're kind of almost in a vintage era discussing things that like communists and AIDS, which are almost like kind of...
Now you know why I'm a legend.
We're in a time capsule, but again from a reporter's point of view, and perhaps because we're not talking to journalists here, but like regular people, why these kinds of stories are important, why they have an impact, how policy responds to it. Can you give that one example of a story or an idea that you've covered which really did change something, which therefore has a ripple effect on all our lives, and it's...
I think maybe, not by any design, surely just by her circumstance, that I kind of started doing stories that nobody else was doing. And I think, I keep going back to Illustrated Weekly, the kind of rigor, the kind of discipline in trying to find stories, was just so important. And important, don't use cliches, don't do that. So now, because I've been writing as public health, as very, very, not very much in Statesman, that's when I came back to Bombay. Then we came back to Bombay after 10 years over there. And that's when HIV AIDS was just beginning to surface. And nobody wanted to touch it, and because I was in this public health thing, I sort of willy-nilly, everything I've gone into really has been willy-nilly by chance, So if there's
Not quite. Not quite. You're a proper journalist.
I know, but the stories that made an impact, like the stories that I went into were not really by design. I was just this is another thing. I've happened to be at the right place at the right time. That if I had not been born in a journalist family, if I had not started with Khushwant Singh, if I had not gone back to Statesman, it was all... And then when AIDS happened, and it was like one of the most challenging, and today I think of my corpus of writing, not the city stories, but what I did with HIV AIDS over 4 or 5 years, because, see, it was so difficult that, nobody, either people did not know or they did not want to talk about it. So doctors would be very cagey, they didn't really know if what I'm saying is correct.
Because it involved sex workers as well.
And the way I began to learn about sex workers and go every time to Kamatipura, and I remember my aunt saying, because her house used to be, quite close by. So sometimes after going there, I would go to her place. First of all, she'd say, have a bath. And then she'd say, again you went there. What if somebody saw you? I said, what, they'll think I've changed my profession? And so it was such a different world, the world of the sex worker. And today when people say, oh, morality, it had nothing to do with morality. It was a purely economic compulsion. And so then and the sex workers didn't want to talk about it because they really saw it as one more form of exploitation. Then after all this trouble, you got your story. Editors were still part of that milieu and they were squeamish about publishing the story.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and at that time, anything I wrote made page one or made. And I remember but then I would also write edits. And I remember the edit page editor finally allowed me to write an edit page special on it. And he said, that's because in one of your edits, you started to talk about how big the problem was. Because you see, people thought, oh, this is a sex worker problem, this is a trucker's problem. It's got nothing to do with us. The great Indian hypocrisy. We are all,
Cultural.
monogamous. Monogamous, yes. Yeah. But actually, AIDS had there was secondary AIDS, there was tertiary AIDS. AIDS, the worst part of it was, people taking, workers or anyone going back home, infecting their wives. And one of the biggest sources of infection was mother to child transmission. So there were three big sources. There was the sex work.
Bachi, I'm going to actually interrupt for a minute only because we're running short of time and your career has only been about 1/3 talked about.
Stop.
But I want to also because you've been this person who's reported, I think one of the few people who's reported in Bombay, Calcutta, Bangalore and Delhi. Can you maybe, tell us what one different feature is in each city over the years that you found as a journalist and which your favorite one is today?
Yeah, actually everything was different,
Yeah.
So when I came to Bombay, it was this, like Calcutta they didn't talk about money, whereas in Bombay, money was in your face, fatafat, show me the goods, take the money and that's the end of the relationship. But, so from Calcutta to Bombay was this huge, and I make one diversion for Khushwant Singh. So, I was in this Loreto house, hot house, kind of Marxist kind of thing. With Khushwant Singh, because of his really huge milieu, they all came to the weekly, Kaifi Azmi, Sardar Ali Jafri, all the Urdu writers, all the Hindi writers. So it was all that. So I was exposed to all that. And it was a very different city. Then, of course, going back to Calcutta, I'll tell you, it was very important going back to the Statesman because that's what refined my language and my style. So, if I knew about hard reporting in Illustrated Weekly, I learned how to add style to substance in the Statesman. And I think one of the reasons why these articles were so well received was that they were they had a lot of substance, but they were also written with a lot of style.
Yeah.
Then, of course, I came
Delhi and Bangalore?
Yeah, so now Bangalore was again a huge change. Again, by chance, I decided that, look, I'm not going to be doing any more of this Bombay Times and celebrity culture, and it was just not my scene. But, so I went to Bangalore. They said, why are you going to Bangalore? We're going to shut this edition down. It's been number 4 for 10 years. And so when I went there, they said, Bachi, you are our only hope. So again, the luck of it was that I was in Bangalore at a time when Bangalore needed what I only knew, which was city reporting. So Bangalore was on this cusp of change. So from that old pensioners' paradise, it had become Silicon Plateau, right? And everything was changing. The bungalows were coming down, that whole retired, people used to retire in Bangalore, and it was all changing. So that's when we kind of decided that, okay, let's go by this route. And my advantage was that, or the Times of India advantage was that, we had editions across the city, across the country. So if there was a flyover being built in Bangalore, one had the experience of so many flyovers, that you could then say the do's and the don'ts. So what we said that yes, you cannot continue in that old armchair existence, but everything doesn't have to change. So this was this whole high-tech city. But again, Bangalore on the outside, everyone said, oh, high-tech, all these, 20, 21 and done. People are coming here. But at the heart of it, Bangalore was still a very traditional South Indian city. Like my secretary wore a bindi with her jeans, she wore anklets with her Doc Marten boots, and so it was different,
Nice.
and so you kind of then learn that okay, you have to make this kind of balance.
Yeah.
And I really loved my Bangalore stint. I really loved it
Nice.
because there were wonderful people. People like Kiran Mazumdar, Nilakani, Infosys. Actually, Narayan Murthy didn't get so involved, but he told me something that he said that at that time globalization became the big thing, and he said, really your success in globalization depends on how fast and how well you urbanize. So he again reinforced the dead dog in the street.
Well, they haven't done a very good job of it in Bangalore, unfortunately.
Yeah, so Bangalore, of course, well, I left, so we couldn't.
Bachi, a little bit about your books and Delhi.
Delhi was something else, but it was again good because then you were thrown into this whole power circuit, so.
Lutyens, etc. And what about the books? Like your most incredible famous book is the Oberoi one. So tell us a little bit about how you did that and why it was just such fun to do.
Again, that's another story. But I had already written a book on the Grand Hotel about the life and times of the Grand Hotel, which predated the Oberois in a huge way. So I love doing research on Raj India, colonialism. Actually, I love doing research. And let me tell you that even when I write third edits or when I write Erratica, I do a lot of research beforehand, and sometimes it's a waste of time because I don't really bring it into the column, but it's always there. And so then with
Under many puns.
And so then when Mr. Oberoi, Rai Bahadur, that's the old man, he said, now I want her to do my biography. And I was very arrogant and I said, I'm not going to become a chronicler of the Oberois. But in the meanwhile, Penguin started their business series. And then it became like kosher. And I said, okay, I will do it through that. And I felt really bad that I had kind of acted so uppity for those 2 years. Because during those 2 years, I lost 3 very important sources. So his wife died and his died. So his wife died, and then also his biggest competitor, in the early days, and his long-time mistress, and they would have been, great sources of material. And I'll tell you a little bit about the mistress. So now, when I was doing this book, Oberoi was 90 years old. He already had a stroke, and so his mind was very sharp, but he was very slow and very soft. So to interview him for 3 or 2 hours, he couldn't do it more at the stretch. It was like as if you've spoken to somebody for the whole day, And I would send him my questions, because I was in Bombay, he was in Delhi, and I would go on weekends, and I would send him my questions, and he'd answer all the questions properly, to the point, not have any notes. But the minute the question about this mistress came up, Nirlep Kaur, he was like an adolescent. His old roomy eyes became dreamy.
For those who don't know, this is the founder of the Oberoi group of hotels. Okay.
This is Thane, okay, but they know. Sorry. And, but let me tell you, she's this South Bombay snob. Where she is. So I now live in Sivri. Okay, and then she came.
Which she renamed?
No, the name of my. No, that's another thing. So when the name of my building is Dosti Flamingos, and she said that sounds like a gay nightclub. When I went there,
I know. But Suri has been renamed by Bachi as
No, so that's why Jojo, the editor, said call it Upper Worli because that's what Alec Padamsee wanted to call Lower Parel. So I told him, look, where I live, it's not lower anything. It's no, he said, I said, it's not upper anything. It's not even lower, it's lowest Parel. So anyway, so then, so I've lost track. And then, so anyway, kind of.
The mistress.
The mistress, yeah. So the mistress, and it was really sad because ultimately we didn't put very much into the book. That was really the only part that was removed because you see, nothing to do with anybody, not the family, but because you see, by then she had passed away, but by then she had become a leader of the Sikh and the separatist movement, and so she was greatly involved with Operation Blue Star, which, as you know, after that whole thing. The army went.
The mistress was involved with Operation.
Yeah, in the sense that she was part of the separatist Khalistan thing. Yeah, and so the army had gone into Golden Temple, and that had become this huge blasphemy, heresy, etc. So the people, I mean, that group said, they said they kind of put a death threat on Mr. Oberoi, Rai Bahadur Oberoi, and said if you kind of write anything which sort of undermines our leader, then you better watch out. So I kind of stayed very clear from that. Yeah, though actually it was really sad because every time, we would send her picture, her portrait which she had to the publisher, and then he would bring it back and say, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And one day he said, Nirlev came to me in a dream. And I said, well, yeah, she was so important in your life and you're excising it. I was again using my little, cynical journalistic, trick to put that lovely chapter back. But it didn't work. Okay. Then Nanavati.
Yeah, and if you can talk about your other amazing book, Nanavati, which I also helped you report on. So tell us about the Nanavati.
Again, not so much about the Oberois, of course, like there was a lot of archival, not from, this is the scary thing, that we have such a bad sense of history. I mean, for everything that is happening, and now we are making it worse because we are wiping out great chapters of history. And but the point is, nobody keeps archives. Now you think a hotel company would at least have menus. Calcutta, which was, I used to joke and say the only surviving industry of Calcutta is nostalgia. But, but even there they never had things. So of course there was a lot of work there. But with Nanavati it had happened. How many of you are familiar with the Nanavati case? One. Okay. So this was this cause celeb of Mumbai. I was not in Mumbai at that time. It became part of Bombay mythology. So there was this very promising naval commander. Okay, how many of you have seen Rustam? There you are. But please do not go by that because that's the worst travesty of a book. Yeah. Okay. And so anyway, so that was 1959. Nanavati was dead. He had gone off to Canada. And okay, you say your story. As to how?
Oh, basically because most of the people involved in this story were either dead or going to be, because it was of a certain time, and they were Parsi. I remember whenever I would go to the Willingdon Club, if I saw a Sindhi or a Parsi who was above the age of 80, I would say, did you know Nanavati or anything about it? And literally gather stories to help Bachi, because there's nothing else to rely on.
So it was like really to get material for that book. But this is, actually I think when you're writing, fiction is very much the long distance runner and the loneliness of the long distance runner. But for non-fiction, you work with a carnival of characters. You have to, because you're getting everything from everywhere, and you can't just go by the main story. And so it would be so difficult to find, but it was so serendipitous the way that stories, like the doors which I thought would lead me to this great expanse of information was kept shut in my face, and windows opened exactly where I never expected them. So the man so this Nanavati shot the Sindhi lover of his English wife. And so now, again, that lover was also dead, and he had one sister, Mamie. She was also dead. No other family member crawled out of the woodwork to claim him. But I said, as I was reading this through the material, you see, and Blitz, I hope you all have heard of Blitz publication.
Yes.
Thank God. Okay. So Blitz was the original red top tabloid of Bombay, of India. And Rusi Karanja, who was this Clark Gable like, suave character, ran it. And he took that story and ran away with it. So Parsi, Rusi Karanja, defense lawyer, Kal Khandala Wala, they made Nanavati into this unalloyed hero. And because they had to make him into the hero, they had to demonize the real victim, who was poor Prem Ahuja. Right? And then they made out as if the wife has just been hypnotized, because this was the 60s, right? So you had to keep the optics of marriage. So I said, I'm not going to do this book till I find out something about Prem Ahuja. And I just couldn't get anything. And then, of all people, there was this great thespian and advertising giant called Jacinta Kuna, who had originally written to ask him about the character, the Mahal of Mumbai at that time, and he never replied. And I met him at a party, I'm going to say very short, and met him at a party, and I said, you don't reply to my SMS? He tells me, oh, my driver keeps my phone and he doesn't read SMS. So I said, oh. And then I said, but what did you want to know? I said, I don't need you for anything, but I'm writing this book on the Nanavati case. And he tells me, oh, I used to party with Prem Ahuja. So I said, oh my God. And he was this great raconteur. So I had my whole chapter. And what a fantastic playboy, lovely guy, etc. So that's how that story came up. So it was like just, like an archaeologist, you're digging through these, and then you have to listen to some people, rambling on for that one nugget of information, and I kind of kept listening to this Parsi, and I said, oh my God, look at this time. But you have to spend that kind of time. And she went on talking, and then suddenly she came up with the fact that when Nanavati was born, the astrologer who was casting the horoscope said, this boy will grow up and shake the world. And then when all this happened, then the mother said, that we never thought he'd shake the world like this, because
Wow. I guess if we have time for a few questions, are we going to take a few questions? Like maybe up to 2 or 3? Would anyone like to ask Bachi?
Yeah, 3 points from your father.
Oh yeah, we'll end with that, Bachi. The 3 mantras of your father's, which are just
all right. Actually,
How did you meet your husband? How did you meet your
no boring.
No, that's my past life, sorry. I have a very nice partner in the audience, but I have my son from my marriage, so I will not say anything for reasons of diplomacy which I don't have. So don't provoke me.
Bachi has renamed the idea of X into Y, spelled WHY.
No, we won't go into that. And anyway, so my father's mantras. So the big thing was make your own sunshine. And really, it's kind of it's sort of seen you through, bad personal experiences, it's seen you through bad editors. And really, I remember once, something happened when I rejoined Times of India. And, we were there trying to make a whole new thing of this old dead, again another dead paper. Not dead, but it was all full of the old-fashioned journalists. And Mr. Samir Jain wanted to change it. So all of us had joined. But in the meanwhile, they got in another paper. They were starting the Independent. So then we were sent to there was a lot of problem in the newsroom, and we were sent to just kind of keep it calm. And then we were, the 3 of us, Kalpana Sharma, Shanta Gokhale and myself, who were the 3 senior women. We were sent there by the editor, but when the management said, how can senior people go to this meeting? So Shanta was deprived of her arts page, Kalpana left in disgust, and I was sent off to Illustrated Weekly as a punishment posting. because but I took that
You
time.
made your own sunshine.
Yeah. So I took that time to write all the longer features that I couldn't write while I was doing all this work. And somebody had actually said no point in sending her on a punishment posting because she refuses to get punished. So,
And the second mantra, Bachi?
the second mantra was be flexible, because if you bend, you won't break. But of course, that doesn't mean that you're a pushover, but doesn't mean you just dig in your heels for the sake of it.
Nice.
And the third one, which I think, and as I've grown old, as I'm at this stage in my life, which I think is really important, was that never be friendless in an unfriendly world. And like, this is not the world of friends of Facebook, right? So
Lovely.
like, one of my best friends is sitting here, and really I've got friends across generations, across genres, and my daughter-in-law is my friend. I hope my son is my friend, and certainly my daughter-in-law is. Stand up and say yes. And yeah, so that. But I have a fourth mantra which I really learned from Khushwant Singh, which is that take your work very seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously.
That's the one that I have learned from Bachi.
Really, like Khushwant Singh was all this, and at that time, even a sub-editor, a feature writer would say, don't change a line of my copy, don't do this. And Khushwant Singh was this great writer. If you said, "Arey Khushwant ji, ye bahut lamba ho gaya, kaat do, nikal do," and he'd leave it to us to do it, And this is another lesson I've learned also from my work on the desk, because I was writing the feature writer stories, but my work was on the desk, and magazine feature editing is something very different. And I learned one thing, that there's nothing in the world, no copy in the world, which will not improve with cutting. So you may think that, oh, I've written this great thing, you go over it. And it has helped me so much, because my column, which started as 700 words, is now down to 360 words. And I actually count characters, not just words.
Because the newsprint is now real estate.
Yeah, so you pare down, and you come to the kernel of it. And I actually love doing it, because even after my manuscript is written, then I roll up my sleeves and say, oh wow, now I'm going to attack it.
Lovely. Any other question? Maybe one more?
The secret of your physical energy and effervescence.
That she won't tell anyone. The secret of your energy and effervescence.
Apart from your wit and grit, we would like to know the secret of your physical energy and effervescence.
Yeah, she said, nah, I'm a teenager and an old woman.
Ma'am, best editor in your career.
Oh,
You
want
work
me
with
to
best
name the
editor.
best editor.
Arey, Khushwant Singh, not by a long time. I'll tell you a joke. There used to be a cartoon which was in the old Parsiana, where there are these two old Parsis, hunched, hawk-nosed and all, and one is telling the other, best community, which others are there? And I'll say that which others editors were there.
Thank you, Ms. Bachi Karkaria, for sharing such heartfelt reflections in this session. Your insights and memories have helped us honor the legend in a way that was both inspiring and deeply moving. Our gratitude to Ms. Namita Devidayal for moderating the conversation with such grace. Friends, once again, loud applause. Some voices don't just tell stories, they shape history. Ms. Bachi Karkaria's journey is one such inspiring story. With immense joy and reverence, we present the Lifetime Achievement Award as a token of our love and respect, celebrating her unparalleled contribution to the world of ideas. May I call upon Dr. Raju Subramanian, Dr. Sujata Jadhav, President Samir Limaye, Manjari Limaye, Convener Atul Bide, Yashoda Bide, and Anuja Kulkarni to join us on the stage.